I'm going to talk about fear of going to the movies in the 1941 movie called One Foot in Heaven, starring Fredric March. And you're going to have to bear with me because I'm a cancer patient and I have to get this shot every month, and it makes me like temporarily stupider than I normally am. And also, I feel like I have the flu for about 3 days, but I'm still enjoying 31 Days of Oscar on TCM, and this movie was on this morning. And the heart of this movie is when Fredric March's character overcomes his fear of going to the movies. And it is ironic because it's a movie in which the turning point goes around someone being afraid of movies or cinema. Just bear with me. And this also is not a horror movie, and it doesn't end up with someone in a mental institution unless you equate organized religion with the mental institution, which, fair enough. Just think of it as a community center where most people are trying to do their best if you can't get behind the spiritual aspect. I do understand because I'm a Methodist and this movie is about Methodists. Let me set this up. Fredric March plays a doctor. He's about to start his practice in Canada and he's about to get married. This is 1907, I think. And he's fixing to get married to this girl who is upper middle class. And he goes to break the news to her parents and her that he has gotten the call to go into the ministry instead. But worse than that, they are not going to be Episcopalians. They're going to be Methodists. And even worse, they're going to stop being Canadians and move to America. Her parents are just like, oh, and, so his wife has to think about it for a second. She thought she was going to be a doctor's wife. Now she's going to be taking a vow of basically poverty, but she says, like Ruth, whither thou goest, I will go. And they get to their first assignment, and the years pass by, and they've got 3 kids, and he's making $385 a year. This is 1917, I think we're at now. World War I is starting up, and they have a loaf of bread and a little bit of butter, and she says, can't you borrow some money? And he gets out like the book of doctrine, and Methodists can't borrow money and they can't go to the movies, and I guess he brings that up because it's going to come up soon. And he's got a son, and I forgot to say that this is based on a true story that his son wrote as a memoir of being a PK, a preacher's kid. And this son is about 10 years old, and he sneaks off and he goes to the movies. And one of the church members accidentally tells on him because everybody's been going to the movies except for Fredric March. And he tells his son, and his son's like, but it was who's that swashbuckling guy? Douglas Fairbanks movie. And his dad's like, I don't care. I should whoop you, but I'm going to go to the movies with you and tell you why this is wrong. And they've recreated the experience. Remember, this is 1941 that this movie is made, but it's set in 1917. They've recreated the experience of how excited people were, especially children, to see these silent films. And I'm going off no notes here, but I think that the film that they went to see was called The Silent Man, and I'll look it up and I'll put it in the description. And the theater's full of kids, and the preacher and his son come in at the end, and they're like, sit down. Oh, wait, that's the preacher. Oops. And they're watching this movie, and the kids are reading the subtitles to each other. Like, nobody says it's your turn to read. They just take turns, and it's so that I suppose younger people who can't read, and probably some of the older people who couldn't read. And the ones that are reading can't read all that well. They're reading like when you're in the 3rd grade and you have to go around the room and everybody reads a paragraph like that. But it gets the point across, and you see the preacher looking, and he has got his judgemental glasses on, and then he takes them off, and then he's smiling, and he has to tell his son that he's wrong, that there's nothing wrong with going to the movies, that the picture had a good moral to it. And in fact, I'm going to preach a sermon about it. And the sermon is, if you're not listening to young people, you're already dead. You should listen to your children. And then his sermon gets cut off at the end. In God's name, amen, because his house is burning down. It's not his house, it's the parsonage, but it's a terrible parsonage because the church doesn't invest anything into it. So it's kind of played for comedy. The firehouse is next door. It goes on fire. So the firemen have to leave. They're hitting each other with water. The first thing the preacher asks is, did you save my books? And then, where are the kids? And then his wife's upset because her new hat's in the house and she paid $5 for this hat. And remember, he makes $385 a year. But the next portion of the movie goes by real fast. They move. He could be a district superintendent. He could go to India, but he decides to be a chaplain on an army base because it's World War I. And then they're living in a tent. And then the next thing you know, the war's over and everybody's cheering. And they, for some reason, they come to his place and they're cheering and cheer with us, preacher. And he's like, no, we need to get down and pray to be thankful that this war has ended. And he's going from trying to please these parishioners living in the terrible house that they've given him and not going to the movies to standing up. And then it goes black and you realize that you've only seen the setup of the movie and the real fight is yet to come. Now that he's not afraid of going to the movies, he's not afraid of youth, of progress. This being afraid of cinema is a fear of progress. It's a fear of liberal, progressive beliefs, which is well played, Hollywood, because they're well known for being very progressive. And so then he can go into the real meat of the movie, which is that they finally get somewhere where they go to Denver, to a church that has some money, and they think that they're going to get a better house and they're going to build church. But the church is full of these evil, rich people that can't sing, that are using the choir as a means to put on a show with themselves and their friends and their family members. And they're mean to their servants, and he's got to defeat them. And I won't say what happens at the end, but it's glorious, and it's a happy ending, which I said in my video about Casino, that you never see a movie that encompasses a person's entire life that's happy. But this one, I believe, has a happy and uplifting ending. Now, I think it may have been... There's a point when he's praying for thankfulness for the end of World War I that he says, this might happen again. And that's dramatic irony because it's 1941 when this picture came out. So it has happened again. And I think that's kind of like the Robert Altman MASH thing where they wanted to make a war criticizing Vietnam, but they set MASH in Korea, the Korean War. That's the same thing here. But, I'm bullshitting a little bit because this was a true story, but you never can put it past Hollywood to change things around. So, this movie is definitely about pushing back against people in the church who are too conservative, who are not really living God's commandment to have the greatest of this be love. And they're also, they can't sing, which is a sin if you're going to be in the choir. And I just loved this movie. It reminds me of everything that was good about being a Methodist. I'm kind of unchurched now because they split the church where I live, and the people decided to join this new church that's homophobic, and I said I can't go for that. So at least I can watch a movie where it's funny that they say that whenever you get some Methodists together, they argue, because they do. They argue, or they form a committee and they have a very formal argument on the committee. I don't know. I really love Fredric March. I think he's underrated. Doesn't get as much love as some of the actors from that time period, but he made a couple of amazing pre-code pictures designed for Living with Gary Cooper, and also one of the versions of Jekyll and Hyde. And he also did one of the, what do you call it? Oh, I've got a visitor in my room here. A Star is Born, and many, many other things. And he died the year that I was born, but feel like I know him because I've seen so many of his movies. Like, he's a character actor that got leading roles. And so if you can find this one to watch, even if you're not religious, as he says in his Socratic argument with a friend that he's having a soda with in the middle of the movie, if you can't see Jesus as the Son of God, see him as a teacher. If you can't see this movie as a movie about religion, then see it as a movie about progress. So I hope I've made some sense, and I will try to get something better, more formal, more back to horror movies next week. But this time, fear of silent movie is fear of the young people and these kids today and their changes. So that's all I have to say about One Foot in Heaven. Have a good night.